All right. All right. Welcome to the Bald Eagle Podcast. I am Shawn Cressman. I am the Bald Eagle. Kind of weird music. Every time before my podcast, I go on and look up some songs that are supposed to pump you up. That was on the list. So whatever you get out of that, hopefully it's positive. All right. So Bald Eagle Podcast, it's 100% exclusively a Philadelphia Eagles podcast, as you can see by my graphics, my shirt, and even the background. 100% Philadelphia Eagles. But I do have some rules. Rule number one, most important one to me, is there are no politics. We don't talk about any politics whatsoever. The exception would be if it happens to affect the game. Hasn't yet. With the exception of the limited capacity in stadiums, and that's all we've really had to talk about. So, but we try to avoid politics 100%. So this is your politics escape. Hopefully that's what it's for you, just like it is for me. Secondly, I don't talk about personal stuff. I don't talk about what the players do personally. We only talk. I focus mostly on or all on football. I don't really listen to or pay attention to the things that people do in their personal lives. Again, if it was something that was impactful that might affect the team, then of course I would. But again, that hasn't happened yet. All right, so let's get to our countdown. I'm sorry, my third rule. I went over the first two. My third rule is I'm not censored, so not a big deal, but I'd like to let everybody know. Okay, so we are going to count down. We have a countdown on the Bald Eagle Podcast, and today we are counting down to the beginning of the 2021 NFL season. It also marks the beginning of free agency, and that day is March 17th, so a week from today. We will be 2 hours into the 2021 NFL season. And free agency will also have begun, which is most likely going to be, free agency is expected to be much more busier than normal due to the lower salary cap. So we currently have just ended, actually. So today's the 10th. Yesterday at 4 p.m. was the cutoff for designating a franchise or transition tag player. Only 10 players were tagged in the NFL. The Eagles didn't tag anybody. Technically, 10 were tagged, but really 9. The Saints tagged safety Marcus Williams. The Broncos tagged safety Justin Simmons. The Panthers tackled Taylor Moton. The Jets free safety Marcus May. The Giants defensive tackle Leonard Williams. Washington's offensive guard Brandon Scherf. The Bucks wide receiver Chris Godwin. The Jags tackle Cam Robinson. The Bears wide receiver Allen Robinson. And then the technicality is that the Cowboys did franchise tag Dak Prescott, but it was a technicality. They just didn't want anybody else to get him in the meantime, and he's going to sign a long-term contract, so that wasn't really a tag. So the Eagles didn't tag anybody. Again, I mentioned earlier that I don't talk about it's exclusively Eagles. Well, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about some things that happen in the NFL, and this is important, I think, because there are a couple of names on that list that perhaps the Eagles were considering going after, namely Allen Robinson, maybe Chris Godwin for the Buccaneers. I don't know if we've been able to afford him, but there are some reasons why we talk a little bit about non-Eagles stuff. Okay. So other things to keep a heads up for, other dates to be aware of. April 5th, that's the day that teams that hired a new head coach after the 2020 season, like the Eagles, may begin off-season workout programs. So they get a 14-day, 2-week advantage over teams that did not. So April 19th, 2 weeks later, is when clubs can begin off-season workout programs who have a returning head coach. April 23rd is the deadline for restricted free agents to sign offer sheets. April 28th, the last day for clubs to match offer sheets for those restricted free agents. And the other date that I typically would have gone over, and it would have come and gone by now, is the NFL Combine. And we've talked a little bit about that in past episodes. Of course, because of the virus, no actual combine, no in-person combine. However, the NFL is going to lean on the college pro days, and they're going to utilize those in lieu of the typical combine. Those pro days started March 5th. That was a week ago Friday, and will continue through April 9th. You can actually see a list. I wasn't going to go through the whole list, but there's a list on. You can Google the pro day schedule, and if there's a certain player and or team that you're looking for, You can find the day that he's going to participate in his pro day and hopefully find some information about that. Some information about pro days. I don't know if they were ever limited. I would assume not, because in the past there was the combine, so I don't think a lot of teams sent a ton of people to pro days. But as of this year, teams are limited to a max of 3 representatives at a pro day, so they can only send 3 people to any given pro day. Next date to remember is, I think anyway, what is it generally for me, the beginning of the season, which is the NFL draft. And one of the nice things, in my opinion, about the NFL is that they continue. There's always these checkpoints throughout the year. So even though I'm running an Eagles podcast and the Eagles aren't playing and the NFL is not even practicing or anything, I still have enough content to put together a 45-minute podcast every week. So, but anyway, the draft is scheduled for April 29th to May 1st. And of course, the first round is on a Thursday, starts at 8 p.m. prime time, probably lasts until 11. The second and third rounds will be on Friday. That's at 7 p.m. And the 4th through 7th rounds are on Sunday. I think that starts at noon. A little ways away, but keep an eye out. We're going to have a draft special where we'll most likely live stream the draft and add our comments. Me and a bunch of guys from the NSN Philly network. Now, in reference to the draft, it's going to be in Cleveland, Ohio. It's supposed to be in Cleveland, Ohio. I read somewhere that the specific date or specific location is going to be determined, but it's supposed to be in Cleveland. So for this year, the Eagles have 4 picks in the top 100 for the first time since 2013. Back the last time in 2013 that they had 4 picks in the top 100 draft picks, they drafted Lane Johnson 4th overall, Zach Ertz 35th overall, Benny Logan 67th, and Matt Barkley 98th overall. So last time we had 4 picks, not a bad haul. Lane Johnson and Zach Ertz have made some meaningful impacts on our team. Matt Barkley, not so bad. I don't know what we traded him away for, if we traded him or cut him, but we did also have 4 picks in the top 100 in 2012. That year we drafted Fletcher Cox 12th overall, Michael Kendricks 46th, Vinny Curry 59th, and Nick Foles 88th. So knock on wood, the 2 times in recent history that the Eagles have had 4 draft picks, we haven't done so bad. Those are some pretty decent names that made some positive long impacts on our team. Now, of course, we have a handful of draft picks based on our schedule, our ending, our wins, losses, our performance. But we also get, and some teams also get, compensatory picks, and they're given for different reasons. So the compensatory picks are given each year, and they're usually picks between rounds 3 and 7, and they're based on a formula that the NFL came up with that takes into account players who left the team in free agency the previous spring. They look at the player's salary, the snap count, postseason awards, and that's some of the things they look at to take into account to decide if and how many compensatory picks you're going to get for those people leaving. To qualify, you also must have more free agents leave than you gain. So of course, almost every team anyway, loses free agents and gains them as well. You have a net loss in free agency to get a compensatory pick. The player that you're getting a pick because they left, they have to sign on a new team by April 27th, and they also have to do well among their peers. They can't be a poor player. Every year, the NFL gives out a maximum of 32 compensatory picks, and no team is able to get more than 4 in any one year. Now, there are some other reasons why a team might get a compensatory pick. One of those reasons is minority driven. There always has been, it seems, a big movement to include and to promote minority coaches. And that's continuing and I think gaining even more traction than it already may have had. So one example is if your team loses a minority coach to another team, it gets hired away. Now you don't fire them or they don't quit, but they get hired away. You could possibly get a compensatory draft pick, and that happened this year. In fact, the NFL had to send out a revised list of all those picks because they incorrectly gave the 49ers 2 picks for losing minority coaches. And in fact, they'll get one, I think, a 3rd round pick over the next 3 years. because they lost 2 minority coaches. They lost Robert Salah and Marin Mayhew. Now, some people might think, well, why would you hire minority coaches? Why would you hire a minority coach away from somebody if you know you're going to give that team a pick? Well, the motivation behind this, as far as I understand it, was this motivates teams to develop minority coaches. So, it motivates them to promote and to train and work with minority coaches and try and get them, into coaching positions. Because then, if they are successful doing that, and that minority coach becomes wanted around the league, then they get a draft pick in return for their hard work. If that coach ends up getting taken away, I guess. So we get, long story short, we get 2 compensatory picks this year. We get a 6th round, 224th overall, and a 6th round, 2 in a row, 225, because we lost Jordan Howard and Ronald Darby last spring. And they had apparently did well enough this year to get those picks. So that actually gives us 10 picks in the draft this year. We have the 6th overall pick, which we're all talking about, and we'll talk about a little bit more. We have a 2nd round, 37th overall, 2 in the 3rd round, the 70th and the 85th. And we skip to the 5th round, where we have 134 and 140. We jump over to the 6th round. We got 165, and then those 2 comp picks, 224 and 225. And then we have the 7th round. We have pick number 234. So a good opportunity to get some. We have some decent early round picks, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. They're not horrible. And then we have a bunch. 1, 2, 3. We have half of them. 6 of our picks are 5th rounds or later. So we can hopefully dig around there and get some great players late in the draft. Now, speaking about the draft and speaking about the 6th pick overall specifically, lots of rumors. And I don't spend a lot of time entertaining rumors either. I feel like it's somewhat of a waste of time. Today's rumor is tomorrow's, nobody remembers tomorrow. And most people that engaged in a lot of these rumors ended up being incorrect. Think about all the trade people that said that Wentz was getting traded to the Bears. So I don't engage too far into rumors, but my opinion is similar to something that Merrill Reese has shared in reference to the Eagles taking specifically a quarterback in the 6th overall pick. So Merrill Reese was quoted saying there are a lot of mock drafts bouncing around and a bunch of draft projections being written. In my opinion, the chances of the Eagles taking a quarterback with the 6th overall pick are close to 0. They will develop Jalen Hurts and sign a veteran backup. Makes a lot of sense. 100% my position as well. That's what I've said before. I think if we take a quarterback in the draft, it needs to be later than the 4th round. So one of our 6, 5, 6, and 7th round picks. I think it's a bad idea. We have much stronger needs on our team than quarterback that we should fill in the earlier rounds. My hope is that we can find a decent quarterback in free agency because, I don't know. I haven't looked at the statistics on later round quarterbacks, and I didn't look at, how many late round quarterbacks have made it to and won Super Bowls. But I think as a backup, which is what we should be looking for here, I think we could find something sufficient in free agency. Now, in my opinion, and this is something else that was again a rumor, but it's and I've heard opposing sides of this rumor. So the rumor is that Jeffrey Lurie has been stated as saying that he wants to build the team around Jalen Hurts and he's not looking for competition. So initially I thought, well, that makes sense, right? Because I mean, if you look at the tape, and we talked about this last time, perhaps Jalen Hurts' stats weren't as good as they could be. If you look strictly at his numbers, perhaps, maybe he could have had better numbers. However, if you watched him play, you would notice that he had a lot of the characteristics that most people anyway look at for a franchise quarterback. He did a lot of things that quarterbacks that are elite do. So in my opinion, we continue to develop him. I don't think we get rid of him. I don't think we bring somebody in to compete with him, at least not seriously. And I only say that because who would we bring in that we have any idea could compete and possibly beat Jalen Hurts? And I don't know the answer to that. So I think we focus on him. He showed really good promise in the limited snaps that he had last year. If you can surround him with a better offensive line and some better receivers, I think he can make some significant improvements this year. So Now, the other side of this rumor is that, and apparently this is common, that Jeffrey Lurie could have come out and said that he is all in on Jalen Hurts because he wants to throw everybody off, and so people perhaps think they can get the quarterback that they want in later rounds. Believe what you want to believe. Perhaps Jeffrey Lurie is playing games, but when it all comes down to it, on the 29th and actually on the 30th, the next day, I'm hopeful that we don't draft a quarterback at 6th round. Lenny Leonard, I appreciate that. I had a friend of mine made these nameplates for me, so and it's growing great, Sean Gata. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. So with that, I thought I'd just take a look at first round quarterbacks. So number one, the first stat that I thought was interesting is all the quarterbacks that were drafted between 2009 and 2016, every single one of them in the first round are no longer with their current teams. And that happened with the trade of Carson Wentz. He was the last one. Jared Goff was second last, but of course he got traded as well. So that starts off our the round. Most recently, 2016, Jared Goff was drafted in the first round, and he went to the Rams. He is no longer there. He's 2-3 in the playoffs. Then you have Carson Wentz, who was drafted by the Eagles, now with the Colts. He's 0-1 in the playoffs. And then Paxton Lynch, who was drafted by the Broncos, 26 overall, is no longer in the league. I believe. I'm not sure. Could be a backup somewhere. In 2015, Jameis Winston was drafted in the first round. He is no longer with the Bucs. Marcus Mariota, drafted by the Titans, no longer there. 2014, Blake Bortles, drafted by the Jags. He's been traded. Johnny Manziel and the Browns in 2014 was the 22nd pick. And Teddy Bridgewater was the 32nd pick. So again, traded away, no longer with the Vikings. 2013, the only quarterback in the first round was E.J. Manuel, who's no longer with the Bills. 2012, Cam Newton was the first overall pick. And he again is no longer with the Panthers. Jake Locker in 2012 was the 8th pick with the Titans. Blaine Gabbert. This was 2012 was probably the worst first round quarterback draft. Listen to these names: Cam Newton. You could argue he was a decent pick because he had a pretty somewhat. I mean, he made it to a Super Bowl. But then you got Jake Locker, 10th overall pick, Blaine Gabbert, and 12th Christian Ponder. So none of those guys are even close to being starters in the NFL right now, and definitely not on their original teams. In 2010, you had Sam Bradford, who was drafted by the Rams, and Tim Tebow by the Broncos. And then lastly, in 2009, you had Matt Stafford, who was drafted by the Lions and just recently traded. Mark Sanchez, who was drafted by the Jets. And last but not least, Josh Freeman, who back when he was drafted was supposed to be one of the up-and-coming quarterbacks in the NFL and then had a pretty quick fall. But he was drafted by the Bucs and he's no longer with them. So now I added all this up. All those quarterbacks that were drafted between 2016 and 2009, that was 18 quarterbacks. Only 5 of them are currently starting. And I have some assumptions built into that 5 of those 18. I'm assuming that Cam Newton will start for a team next year. I'm assuming that Teddy Bridgewater will start for a team next year. And I'm assuming that Carson Wentz will start next year for the Colts. And I think as of today, he probably will. I don't know that all 3 of those are going to make it through the whole season as starters, though. So 5 out of the 18 that could drop. Out of those 18s drafted, only 5 have made the playoffs. And those that have made the playoffs have a combined record of 12-13. 2 have actually played in the Super Bowl, right? But none have won. So not a real good record for first round draft picks through from 2009 to 2016. And I was thinking I looked that stuff up just because the rumors of us possibly picking another first round draft pick quarterback. I don't know historically how many times, if you put all the winning quarterbacks or Super Bowl quarterbacks that got to the Super Bowl, if you would look at how many were drafted in the first round and how many were drafted in other rounds, I don't know. But clearly there's no direct correlation to drafting a first round quarterback and significant success. So that's another reason why I would not draft a quarterback 6th overall. So now, So we're going to stop talking about the draft, well, at least for now. We're going to have some other episodes where we'll go into detail about who we think might be drafted and who, what positions we need to fill. But for now, I want to talk a little bit about who could replace or who could be a good backup quarterback that is currently or possibly will be a free agent. These aren't really in any order. I'll put them in order at the end. But so the first guy that I think would be a great fit. Actually, I will do it in order. I think he's the top of my list, and that'd be Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I think Fitzmagic could be a great backup quarterback. I don't know off the top of my head if he's looking to be a backup. I did hear recently that he is not going to retire, but I don't know for sure if he's looking to be a starter. He has a shot. He's had some excellent years. But we all know about Fitzmagic. He was actually the starter last year for the Dolphins until Tua took over. He's been on 8 teams in the last 16 years. He's probably played under more offensive schemes than most coaches, I would think. Best year, 2015 with the Jets. He was 10-6. He completed 59.6% of his passes for almost 4,000 yards, 3,905. 31 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, and an 88 quarterback rating. Really good numbers. Much better than a decent amount of starting NFL quarterbacks. Last year in the 9 games that he played, which included 7 starts, he completed 68.5% of his passes, which is excellent, for 2,091 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Not a real good ratio there, but a rating of 95.6. So again, in those 7 starts and 9 games he played, I would say 95.6 was probably one of the higher quarterback ratings in the NFL. Of course, everybody else most of the others played 16 plus games. But anyway, so I think Fitzpatrick, in my opinion, is number 1 on the list for an opportunity to acquire in free agency. The guy second on my list would be Andy Dalton. Of course, Andy Dalton was traded to or signed by the Cowboys last year after Dak was injured. And in 9 games as a starter, he was 4-5, not a great record, but he completed 64.9% of his passes, which is good, for 2,170 yards, 14 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and an 87 quarterback rating. So pretty on par with some of Fitzmagic's better games. Now, the nice thing about Andy Dalton is he only made $3 million last year, $3 million. To kind of to give you a comparison, last year, we paid Nate Sudfeld $2 million. So $3 million for Andy Dalton, who has had 3 Pro Bowl years, 2011, 2014, 2016. It'd be great. It'd be a really good backup. So he's number 2 on my list. Number 3, we got Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor, I've always thought he had good potential, but he just never seemed to really be able to pull it off. He is another guy that started for the Chargers as a starter at the beginning of the year last year. But then Justin Herbert came in, filled in, and never gave the job back again. So Justin Herbert came in, did really well, and Tyrod Taylor is now the backup for him. He hasn't been a full-time starter since 2017, which is why he dropped on my list of priorities. The best year he had was in 2015 with Buffalo. He completed 63.7% of his passes for 3,035 yards. He had 20 touchdowns and 6 interceptions and a quarterback rating of 99.4, which is pretty good. I mean, that's, if he can, I mean, those are numbers. The yards and the touchdowns are a little light, but remember, he's a running quarterback. So most likely he was taken off and running often. Now, he might be expensive, and that's partially why he fell as well. He's coming off a 2-year, $11 million deal with the Chargers. So I don't know how we could afford him, especially if he's going to be purely a backup. So then it brings up somebody who we're all familiar with as well, especially since our former franchise quarterback got drafted to his former team. Number 4 is Jacoby Brissett. So Jacoby Brissett doesn't have a lot of starting time under his belt. He's only had 2 full seasons in his career. One of his best years was in 2019. He completed 61% of his passes for slightly under 3,000 yards, 2,942, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 88 quarterback rating. You'll notice that some of these guys' best/recent years are very similar. Decent completion percentages, nothing amazing, decent yardage, okay touchdown to interception ratios, not significantly, not real poor, not great, but okay, and pretty decent ratings. So Brissett also had 228 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. So he is a dual threat along with Tyrod Taylor. Brissett also possibly is a front runner because he did work with Sirianni while Sirianni was offensive coordinator in Indianapolis. Number 5, a name that we've heard a while, and he's still around, is Brian Hoyer. Brian Hoyer has had a 12-year career with 7 different teams, so he's a traveler just like Fitzmagic. He has 39 starts. His record is 16-23. The most recent string as a starter was in 2017 for the 49ers. He started 6 games, went 0-6, completed 58% of his passes for 1,245 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a 74.5 quarterback rating. So he is genuinely a backup. He is not a starting quarterback. And he actually backed up Jacoby Brissett in 2019 with Nick Sirianni as the OC. Hoyer would be, in my opinion, I think Hoyer would be the cheap option. I think Brian Hoyer could come in. We probably would get him cheaper than anybody else, and he brings a lot of veteran experience. And there's really no threat for him to overtake Jalen Hurts at starter. So now there's 2 other names. I don't know the odds of these 2 guys considering backup roles. The first one is Alex Smith. Most of us, I hope, are familiar with him being the comeback player of the year. He has a 16-year career with 3 teams. He's got 4 11+ win seasons. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler. I checked his 5-year career with Kansas City. It actually was pretty close to being in line with some of the top quarterbacks in that same period. Now he didn't have quite nearly as many touchdowns, and that was probably what differentiates him from the others. But over his 5-year career in Kansas City, he was 50-26. He completed 65.1% of his passes for 17,608 yards. He had 102 touchdowns, 33 interceptions, and a rating of 94.8. Those are all excellent numbers. Now, I mentioned that I compared him to some of the leagues. I compared him to Tom Brady, to Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and he was in line with all those guys as far as wins are concerned, as far as completion percentage, but he was light on yardage and touchdowns. His touchdown to interception ratio was good, and his rating was right up there with everybody. But he didn't throw. It was a significant difference between him and the other quarterbacks as far as touchdowns thrown. And in his 5-year career, the Chiefs went to the playoffs 4 times. The problem with Alex Smith, and I'm not sure, I apologize, I'm not sure if he's been released or if they're going to trade him. I think he's been released, but he had 2 years left on a 4-year, $94 million contract. He signed that contract because he was supposed to be the starter for the Washington football team, and of course his injury kind of derailed that. And now they have they're giving the reins, I believe, to Taylor Heineke, who had a couple of good games. So he could be awfully expensive, and I don't know that he couldn't start or at least compete with some people for a starting position. So I'm not sure we could afford him, and I'm not sure we want somebody who could legitimately immediately play better, possibly than Jalen Hurts, right? And lastly, I got Cam Newton on the list. We all know who Cam Newton is. Played last year for the Patriots, but he's a free agent this year. Same thing. I included him in the list of starting quarterbacks from the draft classes between 2009 and 2016. But I don't know if he wants to be a backup either. I don't know if he would accept a backup. I don't know. Given his personality, I would think he wouldn't. Given how flamboyant he is and over the top, I feel like he would be, either a starter or not on the team. So, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, so that's just a couple of the quarterbacks that we could possibly go after in free agency. Again, perhaps we draft a quarterback, but hopefully in a late round. And maybe we'll test the free agency market and grab somebody cheap. Maybe Brian Hoyer should go up to the top of the list because realistically, he's probably going to be the cheapest, has the most experience, and the least risk of replacing Hurts. On a side note, I was listening to a podcast, and they brought up a similar argument that we shouldn't draft or pick somebody strictly because we don't want competition with a specific player. And initially you think to yourself, well, that doesn't make any sense, right? In the NFL, you want the best person to always be playing. You want competition. However, when it comes to NFL quarterbacks, I don't know that that's always the case. And we really don't know for sure that that's not what happened to Carson Wentz. We really don't know exactly what happened to Carson Wentz. There's, again, if you want to go, if you'd like rumors, Google Carson Wentz, and you can find a ton of them about what happened with him and Doug Peterson and Jeffrey Lurie, blah, blah, blah. So, I'm okay with them bringing on someone who can mentor Jalen Hurts. But I'm only saying not to bring on competition because I don't think, and I think I said this earlier. Number one, if you're thinking about bringing competition from the draft, historically that's you're kind of your odds of getting an excellent quarterback in the first round aren't that great. So you're going to hopefully and you don't want to if you draft a quarterback in the sixth overall pick, you have high expectations for that guy. I mean, you wouldn't draft him if you didn't expect him to start. So that would, unless you had some guaranteed formula, which nobody has, to know that this quarterback was going to do better than Jalen Hurts, it's a waste of a pick. When we know that Jalen Hurts showed some really good signs, and most likely with good coaching and surrounding staff and surrounding teammates can do pretty well. Now, as far as free agents is concerned, why wouldn't you want to pick a quarterback that could compete with Hurts? The only argument I would have for that is that if a quarterback could come in and compete with Hurts for the starting spot, we most likely couldn't afford him. We don't have a lot of salary cap room, and we have to make moves as we've been doing since we've been able to free up space. Again, I don't think our need at quarterback is nearly as high as it is at other places. Linebacker, corner. We need a decent number one receiver. So my opinion is to not that I'm concerned with competition and how that might hurt things. What I'm concerned about is that we have more dire needs, in my opinion, and wasting money in free agency or picks on a quarterback, I think, is a bad idea. All right. So let's move on to some Eagles news. All right. I told you we weren't going to talk about politics. Here's the brief politic talk. The state of Pennsylvania has lifted some COVID restrictions on and increased some occupancy limits on both indoor and outdoor venues, large venues. So they increased their occupancy in outdoor events to 20%. The Lynx capacity is roughly 69,176 people, roughly, not exactly. 20% of that would be 13,835 people. So as of today, and hopefully this continues, things continue on the positive path we've been on for the last few months. Hopefully, these stadiums will be at full capacity by the beginning of the regular season. Indoor events are limited to 15%. So currently, this does affect the Flyers and the Sixers. They're allowed 3,100 fans, and the Phillies around 8,000. So in both situations, outdoor and indoor, you're still required to social distance and wear a mask. But in any case, things are moving in the right direction. We have 6 months until the regular season begins. If they continue this way, hopefully we can have significantly higher capacity, possibly full. The Eagles made a few roster moves over the last few weeks. We tendered 3 exclusive rights to free agents. Alex Singleton, Boston Scott, and Greg Ward have all been locked up. Speaking of free agents and need, I believe we need a number one receiver, and I'm on the fence about who we should draft 6th overall. We need a receiver, absolutely, but Kyle Pitts, tight end, from what I'm reading, is essentially a wide receiver, right, with the height and the size, and he's also a tight end, so he's kind of a dual player. And I think, again, with a lot of the need that we have, if we can find people that can play different positions like that, I think that's a plus. But Greg Ward, I think, can be one of the better receivers on our team. If you look at film again last year, more often when Wentz was in, but also when Hurts had the ball, Greg Ward was almost always open. He oftentimes he was open, and not just slightly open, clearly open. And in the beginning of the year, Wentz missed him, and Hurts missed him a couple of times too. He didn't get I don't believe he played as much either the last half of the season, but because we tried to get some time with Watkins and some of the other rookies. But Greg Ward can be a really good possession receiver if Hurts looks at him more often. So we locked those guys up. Alex Singleton, we've talked a little bit about him and how well he did. So that's a great a great sign for us. And Boston Scott, just another little guy that's quick and can really shake things up out of the backfield if used properly. We're doing some restructuring as well to free up some salary cap space. We restructured Jason Kelsey's contract, so he is staying. There were rumors that he might leave. Some people thought that it would be best for him to leave, but he wants to stay in Philadelphia, so we restructured him. We restructured Darius Slay's contract and Isaac Sayamalo's as well. So just an effort to create cap space, because that $34 million hit we're taking for Wentz is significant, and it's going to be there's going to be some creativity involved in creating some cap space. Some rumors. I've heard a rumor that we've already restructured Lane Johnson's contract. I'm not sure why it hasn't been announced. Also, rumors that Brandon Graham's contract will be restructured. Brandon Graham specifically, it seems like he wants to stay in Philly. In fact, in an interview, he said, and I quote, "I don't want to go anywhere. I don't have long, but I know for me, I'm here in Philly. So when I'm retired, I'm either going to be working here or doing something in Philly to stay connected to the team. I don't want to mess that up by just dipping out when things got a little tough. But who knows how it's going to go this year. Jalen Hurts might go in there and rock our world and lead this team down the road. I feel we could go." Great quote. And I like players who are willing to restructure and even take hits to their salary to stay with teams that they want to stay in. And Tom Brady, as much as he wins, and we all hate that, I mean, that's what he's done almost his whole career. He's restructured contracts and taken lower pay, and he's been able. It's given his team the ability to surround him with better players. So, greed generally is not a good thing, and clearly it's not that great in the NFL. And realistically, we're talking about most of these guys are millionaires, and so we're talking about making. For Brady, he was making maybe I think 17 to 20, where he probably could have commanded the top pay in the league. Other trade rumors that we got going on. Columnist Michael Silver claims multiple teams have called the Eagles about trading tight end Zach Ertz. I'm fine with that. I hope we trade tight end Zach Ertz. I think Goddard can replace him and do well. Even some of those old guys that we had, like Richard Rodgers last year, made an impact and did well. And if we draft Kyle Pitts, him and Goddard together, I think would be an excellent team. We don't really need someone like Zach Ertz, who's had a great career, but I think he's at the tail end of it. I think he's getting older, and there seems to be interest for him. So if we can get something decent for him, a third round, a decent, maybe a decent corner, or a linebacker that can cover. Perhaps, offensive lineman wouldn't hurt. I think we're going to be better at offensive linemen this year than we were last. But so anyway, I'm fine with us trading away Zach Ertz. And you got to remember too, my decisions are primarily business driven. I don't think emotionally, because I see a lot of posts from Eagles fans are like, don't draft, don't get rid of Ertz. I love Ertz and he's done so much for our team. And absolutely, I love him, and he has done a lot for our team. But that's not why we wouldn't trade him. We wouldn't keep him just because he's been a good player and we like him. We wouldn't trade him because we think going forward he would be worth what we want to pay him. So anyway, there's also been rumors about the Eagles trading Brandon Brooks. There came along an article that suggested that the Eagles were going to essentially get rid of as many people as they could to hoard draft picks and or cheaper, younger free agents. It's kind of an overhaul of the whole team. That was Albert Breer that reported that, so I don't know how accurate that might be. All right, that's the end of the Eagles news. So we always get Bald Eagle podcast, man. I love to do some Eagles facts. So now I'm going to talk about an Eagles fact, not a real one this time. With the Eagles fact, I do things like I spotlight some of our Hall of Famers. I spotlight some of our best teams. I've been recapping all of our years since the beginning, since 1934. So this time I thought I'd go back. We're coming up to the draft soon. In my opinion, the beginning of unofficial and most exciting beginning of the season. So I thought I'd talk about the Eagles' first NFL draft pick. And actually, the Eagles' first draft pick was first overall in the first ever NFL draft. So we had the first ever NFL draft pick. Didn't turn out very well, but we still had them. So the first NFL draft was held in 1936. The Eagles had the first overall pick, and we drafted a halfback by the name of Jay Berwanger. Again, he was the first person ever drafted into the NFL. Berwanger was also the first winner of the Downtown Athletic Club Trophy. Now, for those of you who aren't sure what that is and trying to figure out, who else has won that trophy, it was actually called. They renamed it the next year, and they called it. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but they called it the Heisman Trophy. So he won the Heisman before it was called the Heisman. He played for the Chicago Maroons at the University of Chicago. They called him the one-man football team. After his senior year, he was nominated by the Chicago Tribune as the Big Ten Most Valuable Player, and it was unanimous All-American as well. He was an interesting story as far as drafting, and this happened often back then because the NFL was still somewhat starting. And if you follow or listen to my podcast, you'll know that even in the 40s when we were winning championships, the Eagles were still struggling financially. Football hadn't caught on enough yet, so that these teams were like currently you start an NFL team and you're making a lot of money. Not the case in the 30s and 40s. So the Eagles drafted him first overall, first ever guy drafted as a running back from Chicago, but they didn't think they could afford him. He was asking for a whopping $1,000 a game, and the Eagles they didn't think they could afford that. So they traded his rights to the Chicago Bears, and in return they got a tackle Art Buss. Berwanger ended up not to sign with the Bears on purpose because he wanted to stay an amateur, because he wanted to compete for a spot in the 1936 Summer Olympics in the decathlon. So this guy was obviously an athlete. Decathlon, if you aren't aware, is 10 events, I think, and I don't know. It's what Kate. I guess his name is Kate. The person's name is Caitlyn Jenner now. That's the one he was so famous for. That person was so famous for winning. Unfortunately, Berwanger did not make the cut for the Olympics. So he ended up going back to considered going back to football, and he met with George Halas, the Bears owner at the time, but the two weren't able to agree on a contract. Berwanger was demanding $15,000 a season, but George Halas his final offer was $13,500. So I guess the two stubborn people, neither one would budge. They both said, we're done. And Berwanger ended up taking a job for the Chicago Rubber Company. Now, I didn't look up the Chicago Rubber Company, but I'm sure it was not condoms. I'm sure they didn't. I don't even know if back in the 30s they had latex condoms. I feel like they were using lambskin back then. But anyway, he worked for the Chicago Rubber Company and was a part-time coach for the University of Chicago. He ended up dying in 2002. He was 88, I think, died from lung cancer. So lived a long life. 88 is well above average life expectancy. I think for a lot of his life too, I think he sold plastic car parts or manufactured plastic car parts. I'm not sure. Anyway, later on, he did express regret for not taking Halas's offer and playing in the NFL. So there you go. Our first draft pick in the NFL, the first draft pick ever in the NFL, never played, over contract disputes for $1,500. Now, I didn't go and look at what $15,000 a year would be in today's dollars. Probably, I mean, it's nowhere near $1 million, I wouldn't think, but I would think it's in the 15,000 in the 30s. I think we're close to 60, maybe 70 with inflation. Anyway, so there it is. That was our first pick, traded to the Bears and never played a down of professional football. All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. Lenny Leonard, the guy who did my graphics, is awesome. He did a great job. Although, if you're still watching, on the right picture of me, we can get rid of that so I can just see more of me. It's not very legible anyway, but thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Just as a reminder, I'm on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. and I'm part of the Notoriety Sports Network, and specifically NSN Philly. So Notoriety Sports Network specifically in Philly. So follow those guys. Follow Notoriety Sports Network. Follow NSN Philly on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm the Bald Eagle podcast on YouTube. I'm Bald Eagle 4133 on social media, so check me out. And watch all the shows that we have on here at NSN Philly. If you're a fan of Philadelphia sports, you can find it all here on our social media. You can find breaking news, updates, rumors about trades. We're oftentimes one of the first sports teams networks out there to get things out so immediately. But we also have a wide range of shows. And NSN Philly is Philadelphia sports, not just the Eagles. But we also have a wide array of shows to watch. Of course, you have me, the Bald Eagle podcast, Wednesdays at 6, all Eagles. On Mondays at 6, you have the Football Smack Talk show with Ryan Reese and Eric Ward. That's an NFL show. They emphasize the Eagles because we are still in Philly, but during the offseason, they'll talk about other teams as well. You have our flagship NSN Philly show that airs Tuesdays at 8:30, hosted by Sean Gata, Eric Palmiero, and Reggie Williams. And then we have the Philly Broadcast show, which is 4 for 4. So they talk about all four sports, hosted by Ryan Reese as well and Ryan Finneran. And that's Fridays at 6:30. So all sports covered, numerous shows to watch, different personalities. We're also having this Saturday at 7 o'clock. We're going to have a free agency special. So that'll include a lot of the names I just mentioned. It'll be on 7 o'clock Saturday at 7 on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. If you're a gamer, starring yours truly, the Bald Eagle, along with Ryan Reese, Eric Ward from the Football Smack Talk Show, Ryan Finneran from the Philly Broadcast, Sean Gata and Reggie Williams from the NSN Philly Show. So the whole crew will be there going over our opinions and who we think will happen in free agency. I'll probably spend most of my time talking exclusively about the Eagles, but the other guys most likely will know things about other teams. So check all that stuff out. Thanks for watching. Go Eagles.